Thank you, Ivan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see a few women here. Actually, when I came in the room this morning, I just saw male. But I believe today is National Women's Day, so it's nice to see a few faces there in the audience. Anyway, thank you for inviting me here today, David and Ian. And what I'm actually going to share with you is just some insights that I have gained from working with people who have been managing change. Because the reality is we have, in terms of the discussion this morning, you know, there will be a lot of products and there'll be a lot of systems in place to roll out the change. But as Ian mentioned in his presentation, it's very much about the people. So what I'm actually going to do with you is three things. First, I'm going to introduce you to the whole concept of what's happening in the leadership arena and what are the key skills to drive change. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what is it that makes people successful, what makes people stand out in terms of managing change. And then I'm going to give you three practical tips that if you go away with today, they will make your lives a lot easier. Because I'm sure sitting in the room here, you're thinking, oh, you know, there are huge challenges. It's not going to be easy. But there are three things that you can take away with you today. And they're very much around managing self, because leadership does start with self, and everybody in this room is a leader. And also, obviously, the key area about being able to influence others to bring them along with the change. Okay, so I want to bring you back. Okay, change. I want to bring you back and trying to imagine back, say, 1998. A date that we just remember back to. 1998, I think the song on the charts, the main movie was Saving Private Ryan, and Oasis were at number one. But there was a young man who had a dream, Rory McIlroy. I know, Ian, I know you've been promoting the North here this morning, but you know, I think isn't it wonderful to see that we have the number one golfer in the world here in Ireland. But anyway, this young man was pretty unique in that he had a dream, and he had a dream at the age of 9, and it was extraordinary. I was actually watching a YouTube video the other day. I don't know, anyone here watched the YouTube video of Rory? Yeah, a few people. And he was interviewed at the age of 9 about what he wanted to achieve, because he'd obviously shown huge promise. And he actually was talking to the interviewer, and he said, I want to go pro. And he said, I want to win the majors. And, you know, the interview was a bit taken aback. This was on BBC. And his coach was interviewed, and his coach said, well, actually, what's extraordinary about this young guy, he has talent, but he's a great head on him. And not only does he have a great head on him, but he's got great support. He's great support through in terms of his parents. So anyway, in terms of progress, obviously he showed huge promise and had a fairly meteoric rise. But as we know, it wasn't without its disappointments. And I'm sure many of you remember 11 months ago, you know, while he was in the lead in terms of winning the Masters, you know, suddenly his emotions got the better of him. He'd one or two bad shots. And if anybody here in the room play golf, you know, you all know what it's like. I play it a bit of it badly, but you know, all you need is one or two shots that go badly, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It sort of starts to all go wrong. And you know, poor Rory, he had this huge disappointment and devastation. But lo and behold, how did he react to it? You know, within a few hours, there was a tweet going around saying, you know, you have to fail before you win. And, you know, he dusted himself down and picked himself up, and, of course, the rest is history. So, you know, I mean, it's a great story, and God knows there's a lot of negative stories out there, so it's important that we do focus on the successes that are out there. But the next question I'd just like to ask you is, what is it that makes Rory and all of these outstanding leaders who've managed people through change, what differentiates them from the average person? And an interesting study was done back in 1995 by Professor Daniel Goleman, who was from Harvard University, and he looked at this specifically. He said, why is it that two people with the same level of IQ can go on and have different levels of success? And interesting enough, he came back and he said that it was down very much to how they managed their emotions. First of all, how they could tune into their emotions and then manage them in a proactive and productive way. And secondly, in terms of how they managed others or how they influenced others. And God knows, we know that when we go back to implement change, we're going to not only just have to manage ourselves, but we really are going to have to influence, you know, some of the pensioners who've already retired, and then also our employers or our employees as well. So these were the critical skills that he had. And there is a model and a science behind this. As we mentioned earlier, myself and Deirdre Murray, we wrote a book on this last year, and it's been extremely well received. And there is a lot of science and hard data behind this. But this is the model. I'm not going to go into it in huge detail because this is a half an hour session. I would love to spend a day with you. I know it's probably the last thing in terms of what you're used to, in terms of the intellectual piece. But suffice to say is that I know that all of you have very high IQ in this room, but I would question how well do you all score on your EQ skills, which would be about how self-aware are you, what are your strengths. There was a recent study that showed that only 1/3 of senior executives were actually aware of what they were really good at, because we're so busy in the role of things that we don't actually take stock and actually look at that. The next thing then is how we manage our emotions. And again, I'll just bring it through quickly. Then the two quarters on the other side are all how we interact with the others, in terms of tuning into others, and then fourthly, in terms of influencing, which is relationship skills. And what Daniel Goleman said is if we have these competencies, and there's 10 competencies that we use that underpin this model, if you have these competencies, it makes your life a lot easier. IQ will get you into the game, but to go from good to great, you need these personal and interpersonal skills. And the good news is, unlike IQ, which is fixed by the age of 17 or 18, EQ can be developed. So that's the good news. So if some of you feel, well, I may be very strong on self-regard or self-confidence, and I may have very high IQ, but maybe my social skills aren't great, there are ways of developing them, because success leaves clues, and people can role model that. So I suppose the key thing is that it can be developed. And our brain has a very high level of plasticity, and it actually can rewire. So there's huge work done in this in the whole area of neuroscience. But anyway, why am I putting this slide up? The reason I'm putting it up is because, yes, we all know the rational reasons why things have to change, but when we're engaging with others, we need to see where they're coming from. And also we need to look at ourselves and say, how am I going to get through this and manage myself? Jack Welch, who I must say, I know he's been around a long time, and he's former chief executive of General Electric, but what an iconic figure in the whole business world. And he says, no doubt EQ is more important than book smarts, but in my experience, it's actually more important in the making of a leader. So yes, IQ will get you into the game, but again, to go to the next level, you really need the personal and interpersonal skills. And in that context, in terms of change, not only is the pension world changing, but how employees think and feel is changing hugely. And there's a new landscape out there. And, in the latest leadership area, they're saying that, what employees now want. Now, I know you are also going to be dealing with pensioners who've left the work arena. But, in terms of the younger people, what they really want is they want to be engaged. They want to have empowerment, which is good for some of the new products, because I know that there is a lot more ownership in them. They also want to be very much part of a shared vision and purpose. What's in it for me? And then the other area is flexibility. They want flexibility. And I know those of you in HR would be very aware of this, and indeed most people in the room, that it has actually changed. The leadership area has changed. So why is that important? It's important because we need to adopt a more personalised approach. Interesting studies in the whole area of managing change, and I'm working with some organisations the last few years through it. And the thing is that in terms of change, 70% of change initiatives fail. And the reason that they fail is that we don't give enough time to the key areas. While process is really important, and the whole IT process to bring in the new system, we should be spending the balance, which you guys should know. What's the balance? 60%. We should be spending 60% on the whole people area in terms of engaging people. And I know from my work with working from companies, we had a workshop last week, a leadership development workshop, and working with companies, and we looked at why change programs didn't work in the past, because they were developing a new one and they wanted to learn from the past. And they said it was very much because they didn't bring people with them. They didn't explain to people the bigger picture and the context and the reason for change. So that's just an important factor to bear in mind. And the other reality is, whether you like it or not, we make decisions emotionally before we do rationally. And there's been a huge amount of work done by Morris in the whole area of marketing and sales, and what makes people buy. And, I'm sure most of you who bought your last car, you didn't buy it because for all the rational reasons. I'm sure it was because you liked the idea of what you'd look like in the car, how it would feel to have the leather steering wheel, and how comfortable it would be. It was very much the emotional piece that would have attracted you. Would I be right in saying that? Or how many of you in the room bought it because for rational reasons? Hands up. Don't believe any of you. Okay. Moving on then. Okay, so that really was to set the scene, that IQ, it gets you into the game, but to actually manage change successfully, you do need the personal and interpersonal skills. I'm going to share with you the 3 key steps that I think are important from your own personal point of view in terms of implementing this change. The first area, and it comes back to Rory, and I think he's a great example. Even at such a young age, you have to create the vision. Now, when I'm talking about the vision, I'm not talking about corporate vision here. When you go back to the office today, or maybe you've already been doing this already, you need to look and say, if I look at success in a year's time with all this pension business and converting people, I need to look at what is success going to look like. I mean, wouldn't it be great to say that you've been able to move people with you and that you've actually stayed actually intact yourself, that you haven't actually gone off the rails. So, a huge thing that's really important is to create that vision. And we now know that our brain, and you can see this from athletes, they actually will visualize what they want. And all successful people, they visualize their goals. And, the brain has a piece in it called the reticular activating system. And when we actually articulate our goals and write them down, it's more likely that they will come about because our reticular activating system works. It's like if you were thinking of buying a car and it's a red car and maybe you haven't made your decision. How many red cars do you actually see from then on in? I guarantee you're noticing red cars all around you. So a huge part of it. So create the vision. It should be positive. And also, if you were writing this down, and I would suggest that you do this, is say that in a year's from today, what is success going to look like for me in terms of managing this pensions challenge? And, what are you going to see? You're going to see pensioners who have actually come with you through the change. You're going to hear people saying, God, you've done a good job on that. You're going to feel, gosh, I've actually managed, it's been challenging, but I've actually been able to achieve it. So if you write that down, and I suggest to people, and we do this in companies now in leadership programs, to write down, I have successfully, brought these people with me. So you need to write it in the present tense. But it's important to have that vision. It's also important to have a plan, and I'm sure with this change in all the pensions, I'm sure you have a plan in place how you're going to roll it out. But I can't highlight enough how important it is to actually visualise the end result. And as we saw, if Rory can do it, why can't we? Then the second area is, with all the difficulties going on there, we need to be able to manage ourselves before we can even start influencing others. And this is the second tip that I'm going to give you, it's all about choosing your response. It doesn't matter what happens to you out there. There's nothing, you can't control everything. But the one thing you can control is how you approach things. And look at Mr. Nelson Mandela. I mean, he's a remarkable human being. And to think that he spent 27 years in prison, that's more than the lifetime of the #1 golfer in the world. He spent 27 years in prison for something that he felt very strongly about, that was a human right. But how did he choose to respond? I actually was out in Robben Island a few years ago. I'm involved in a project out there. And I remember taking the boat out, my husband and my 2 kids, and 2 of my 4 kids. And we went out in the boat, and it was the wildest place because it is the most southerly tip of Africa. And it was blistering sunshine, and we were brought on a tour by one of the ex-ANC people, or ANC prisoners who was there. And I don't know, anybody been on Robben Island? It's an extraordinary place, so you've seen what it's like. But anyway, I couldn't help imagining as I went on a tour around the island and into the mines and, imagining how day in, day out, they were out in this blistering sun with their little hammers chiseling away, in terms of the mines. And then we actually were brought to the prison cell, room 64446, where Mandela spent most of his time in prison. And you couldn't help thinking what anger he must have felt, what frustration, and what fear he must have had for his life. But again, he chose his response. What he did was he physically looked after himself because he channeled his energy into that area. He spent an hour a day on his physical fitness. He was also very clever because he knew, and he obviously had a vision as well, that to make things happen and influence, he had to befriend his enemies. So he actually learned Afrikaners. And, within a short space of time, he was influencing things. And he was also inspiring all the other prisoners on Robben Island with him. So again, why is that important to you? That is important because you're the master of your own fate. You can't control what is happening out there in the environment, but you can choose your response to it. And what's important about this emotional piece is that, whether we like it, we are emotional beings. Even the chief financial officers and financial directors are emotional beings. But what's key about this is that he made emotions work for them. Emotions actually give you energy and they give you powerful signals. And if you pay attention to them, you can actually make them work for you. And that's exactly what he did. So if you're feeling frustrated, anxious, and also your people back in the office, it's important to channel that energy productively. So just very quickly summarising that, focus only what you can control. There's no point worrying about things. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day, the psychologists say. And we spend, guess what percentage we spend in terms of relating to the past and the future? Any idea? What percentage? 50. We spend 90% of our thoughts are relating to things we should have done or could have done in the past, or worrying about the future. Now, that is a huge amount of energy. The latest research shows that we actually waste about 2.1 hours a day because we are not present. We are not paying attention. And think of the impact that has on when you're dealing with other people if you're not present. So food for thought. Anyway, focus on what you can control. Engage the support of others. A bit like Mandela, it's going to be difficult out there. And, there may be, in terms of opportunities with people in this room, maybe in different companies, to be able to share experiences and share learnings from each other, but to gain support. And also with the people who are resistant to change and the change champions. When you're planning, you need to think, who are these people? Because they will be the people who will help you through change. And the resistors are the ones that you need to engage first. A bit like Mandela, the way he engaged his enemies himself in prison. As I mentioned, channel your energies productively and schedule the important. Talking to people now, they're saying they have so much to do and not enough time. And there's so many demands. We have to work harder, smarter for less. It's important that you schedule time for the important things. You obviously need to schedule time for your work, and be more productive. But also it's important to schedule time for the important things in life. Things that you enjoy. If you play golf, maybe go out to the golf. In terms of scheduling time in the gym to give you more energy. A bit like Mandela did. So it's important. We have a lot of devices. Looking at iPhones here, that you can schedule things and in terms of your computer. And if you schedule it in advance, it makes it'll actually be done. If you don't schedule it, it won't be done. I often suggest to people to spend a half an hour every week, could be on a Friday, reviewing the week went by, what went well, and planning for the week ahead, and making time for the important things like family, friends, fitness, whatever you're into. Okay, that's number 2. So choose your response. You can't choose the situation out there, but you can choose your attitude to it. And you can deploy and use your emotions in a productive way to give you more energy to manage the challenge that you have. So choose your response. And then the last area, and we've, in terms of the panel, and Ian spoke about it earlier on, it's all about communication. You may be able to be very productive yourself. You have the plan, you visualise the outcome, everything's going to go really well. You're actually getting yourself in order in terms of scheduling what you need to do, looking after yourself and being positive about it. But unless you can bring other people with you, how on earth are you going to, how is success going to happen for you? And this whole pensions piece, you're not going to win people over. So I picked Mary Robinson here, or sorry, Mary McAleese. Again, National Women's Day. I thought it was nice to have a woman. But what an icon she is in this whole area of communication. Because not only has she very high IQ and she's a very skilled lawyer, but she has that unique ability to tune into people and to come in at their level. And again, that is so valuable when you're dealing maybe one day with some of the pensioners who have different concerns. You know, they're very much wrapped up about security and they don't like change. They're not open to it. And then obviously the younger people who are maybe a bit more flexible and they want more empowerment and ownership. So you know, she has that ability to tune in. I was at the Bloom Festival, which is the Irish Chelsea show last year, and I was actually, it was just so inspirational to watch her because she came into a Nevin Maguire demonstration, and we were there out in the Phoenix Park at this Bloom Festival, and she came in unannounced. Nobody was expecting her to be there, but she walked in. Now, obviously, there was a bit of a gang with her in terms of protecting her, but she came in. She was talking to Mary from Moore Street. She was talking to Nevin Maguire's mother, Nevin Maguire's twin, and she gets up and just makes a speech right on everybody's level in terms of what a positive experience this Bloom Festival was. But the extraordinary thing is then, within a week, she was shaking hands with the Queen and also with Barack Obama. So again, extraordinary ability to empathise, step into somebody else's shoes. So when you're going to communicate, you need to engage the support of others, and that means stepping in to their shoes and being able to see things from their perspective. Interesting other fact is that when we're communicating, words are only 7% of our communication. The rest is body language and tone of voice. So just pay attention to that when you're actually interacting with your employees. So just summarising that, and again, just think of Mary. You know, when you're dealing with people, if you could adopt a Mary-like approach in dealing with your pensioners, I'm sure you could win them over. She's very persuasive and she does it, but she does it in terms of what's important to them. So stepping into their shoes, adapting the message for the audience, you know, and the message needs to be very clear, open and authentic. And that is so important. You have to be honest. And you can't pretty things up. You know, you have to say it as it is. But it's not just what you say, it's how you say it that is key. And more face-to-face time. We're spending far too much time at our desks. You know, again, I'm just working with individual and organisations. There's too much email in terms of Blackberries and meetings about meetings. You know, you need to get up out of your desk and engage in face-to-face communication with your people. And ask them, get feedback. So, how am I doing on time? Have I gone over?
No, 5 minutes.
Oh, right, okay. Anyway, just to summarise, as I said, I'm assuming that there's the whole logical piece that has been looked at earlier on in terms of we know that the climate is changing out there. We know change is here to stay, and we need to adapt our approach. Irish Life have obviously been very adaptive to the market and have developed some exciting new products that are very flexible and can meet the demands out there. But at the end of the day, it's what we do when we go back to our organisations that matter. And really just to summarise that, number one, a bit like, think of Rory, you have to articulate what you want. And this is for you personally, so that when you look back in a year's time, that you will have done it successfully. So you need to write it down. As they say, think it, then ink it. So create the vision and also commit to it. Commit today that you're actually going to take action on this. John Cotter, who does a huge amount of work in the whole area of change in Harvard, he says, you know, the first thing you need to do is create a sense of urgency. And you can feel that today. So you need to create the vision and commit. Second thing, and again, all you have to do is think of Mandela. Choose your response. Nothing you can do about the environment, but you can choose how you respond to it. You can choose how you use your emotions in a proactive way for you, to look after yourself and to inspire others to follow you. And, you know, there's going to be other challenges on the way. So a bit like Rory, you know, when you get the knockbacks, you know, that whole bounce back ability, again, it just comes back to how we actually look at things that makes the difference. And then the last area, communication. And again, just think of Mary. Just think of Mary with Barack. Just think of Mary with the Queen. Just think with Mary at Bloom and Johnny and Kieran and Mr. Nevin Maguire. So, but the key thing on the communication, I have it down 3 times, because you have to reinforce communication and you have to get feedback. And I can't advocate that enough. So they're the 3 key tips. So as I said, the overview is that the landscape has changed. We are all leaders in the room. You have to adapt your approach. IQ, it gets you into the game, and you all have very high levels of IQ. I'm sure you have high levels of EQ as well. But I'm sure, like all of us, unlike IQ, it can be developed. So if you feel that some of those skills that you can develop, pay attention to them and work on them. Because success leaves clues, and there are ways that you can develop these skills. So as I said, that was the key background. And then these 3 tips. If you take these 3 tips away today, that is going to make a huge difference in terms of implementing change. And you'll be able to look back, and God knows, wouldn't it be nice to be able to look back in a year's time and saying, gosh, I remember that day we were at the convention centre at the Irish Life Day, and I was feeling anxious about the uncertainty ahead, thinking, how am I going to bring people through this change with me, and how am I going to manage myself? And then to be able to look back and say, well, I did create the vision. I did manage myself through the process, which is key, because leadership starts with self. And more importantly, it's not going to be easy, but I certainly did my best to engage people and bring them along with me. So that really sums up where we are. But I would like just to leave you with one quote, which to me I think it says it all. It's by Niebuhr, who's a philosopher, and he said, accept the things you cannot change, have the courage to change the things you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you very much.